Welcome to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners via Simaringa Radio 107.9 FM, respective radio stations island-wide, Tel TV Plus Channel 15, and online viewers. I'm Rolika Roach, and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, March 11, 2026. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment, and Infrastructure, Patrice Gums Jr. to address you. Minister Gums, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning to my colleague ministers, members of the press, and to those viewing and listening online or in person. Just to be very clear, I will only be making public statements. Unfortunately, I don't have time to take questions this morning, but of course the media is always welcome to contact my PR with any follow-up. Very briefly, I'd like to today talk about a solid waste tender. During the evaluation phase of the tenders, it came to our attention that there were discrepancies in the information submitted in the bids versus the information given in the tender. As you recall, I made an announcement in January that 17 bids were received and all the bidders had discrepancies. The first 11, following the evaluation process, were immediately excluded from the bidding process for not following the proper procedures. The remaining 6 did not follow the terms of reference as mentioned in the tender document, which automatically knocked out all bids from consideration. I immediately sought legal advice on how to proceed, seeing as there was clearly due to procedural error, but unfortunately the information used in the tenders meant we couldn't truly consider the bids submitted. This ultimately means that the solid waste contracts will have to be retendered. We have contracted a third party to also evaluate how the first tender is sent to have failed, and will share more details on the new tender when a new tender is finalized. This means that the contract team is working on finalizing the way forward for the interim period of 3 months, which will lead, of course, to the retendering in the future. I would like to thank the haulers for their patience and the team for their hard work over the last few months. Solid waste is no small undertaking, especially since we are currently restructuring our waste sector by adding things like a waste authority, the payment structure, and considering the final framework that will be implemented during the new contract. I'd like to also preface this, of course, and I've been asked the question a few times, does this at all have to do any sort of mistake or error on the side of government? Let me clarify once again, no, this has nothing to do from government side. This has completely to do with the manner in which the tenders were responded to. The fact that we don't have a 2026 budget is also not a problem. This has been discussed and already validated by the relevant authorities that in the interest of the national interest, that these contracts could have been issued. That's also clear. So once again, just to make that abundantly clear, that this really is a retendering due to the challenges of those persons who submitted and not at all from the side of government. But we are, of course, going to get a third party to also support our investigation of this as well. As regards to district cleaning, a second contract, a tender that's also pending, we have decided to restructure the scope of work in the contracts to be much more efficient. There will also be an interim period of 3 months. During this interim period, it will also be handled by the contracting team using government rates and with verification the companies are actually registered as cleaning companies. We will be using contractors government has worked with in the past and current district cleaners. The first month during this period, we focus on main roads, public beaches, cemeteries, and public schools. And finally, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the very great event from the St. Martin Automotive Association, which took place again on March 8th. This was a retest following the rains of February, where it limited the participation. Government, of course, remains very committed to supporting all and any sports activities once they're properly organized. And of course, I can thank my minister, colleague of justice, who supported as well in ensuring that the proper procedures and permits were also in place. So once again, much congratulations to the team. They have been working very hard to restructure and professionalize the Automotive Association, and I think we wish them all the luck as well as they continue to develop the sport on the island. With that, once again, as stated, these are my opening remarks. Thank you, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact my office for any verification. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Gums, for your opening remarks. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Minister of Justice, Natalie Tacklin, to address you. Minister Tacklin, you have the floor.
Good morning. Is this one? Yep, we're good? Yes. Good morning, members of the press, to the colleagues at CoM, and of course to those listening and viewing at home on the radio or wherever the sound of my voice reaches you. Thank you for joining us today. Over the past days and weeks, the Ministry of Justice has continued to take important steps to strengthen safety, cooperation, and reform within our justice system. Today, I would like to briefly highlight several developments that reflect the progress that we are making. First, as part of the ongoing detention sector reform program, we welcomed 14 correctional officers from Suriname who have now arrived in St. Martin to support operations in the Point Blanche prison. Their arrival represents an important step towards stabilizing the current situation at the facility and providing additional capacity for our existing staff. These officers were formally sworn in last week and are already working alongside our local correctional officers as part of the broader reform efforts taking place within the detention sector. Their presence will help create space for training, professional development, and the continued recruitment and preparation of local officers as we work toward building a modern and sustainable correctional system. Another important development took place yesterday with the signing of the Hot Pursuit Treaty between the French and the Dutch sides of the island, or more formally, between the Republic of France and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. This agreement strengthens operational cooperation at sea and allows authorities from both sides to continue pursuing suspects across maritime boundaries when necessary. For an island that shares one landmass and one maritime space, cooperation is not optional, but it is essential. This treaty closes gaps that criminal networks have sometimes taken advantage of and reinforces the strong working relationship that already exists between our law enforcement authorities. This spirit of cooperation was also reflected last week during the visit of the Préfet of Saint-Barthélemy and Saint-Martin, along with representatives from the French Justice Infrastructure Agency. During that visit, discussions focused on the reform and reconstruction plans for Point Blanche prison and the broader transformation of the detention sector. The delegation was able to gain insight into the work currently underway on the Dutch side of the island, including the development of our new modern correctional facility that prioritizes security, rehabilitation, and structured inmate management. Exchanges such as these are valuable as both sides continue to work together on matters related to justice and public safety. This visit was also in light of some of the articles that were seen in the press and the announcement also made, I believe it was by the French Minister of Justice during his visit to St. Martin, in which he indicated that the French side of the island would also be pursuing the construction of a prison. And in that spirit of cooperation, we've been assisting and providing information where we can learn from one another and see how we can strengthen ourselves on both sides of the island. So we will continue to engage with the French on this topic and share with them, what we have learned, what our challenges are, so that, of course, it would be an easier road for them as well. Finally, I would also like to highlight the launch of the Interinsular Gun Buyback and Firearms Surrender Action, which is a coordinated initiative across the Dutch Caribbean. So for the first time, our police forces across Curaçao, Aruba, St. Martin, and the Caribbean Netherlands, or the BES, are conducting a joint firearms surrender and buyback program during the same period. This initiative gives individuals who are in possession of illegal firearms the opportunity to voluntarily surrender these weapons without facing legal consequences for illegal possession during the designated surrender period. This coordinated approach sends a clear message. Illegal firearms and gun violence have no place in our communities. By acting together as a region, we aim to reduce the number of illegal weapons in circulation and prevent violence before it occurs. Following the surrender period, enforcement efforts will be intensified across all participating islands. Individuals who continue to possess illegal firearms after this opportunity will face strict enforcement and prosecution. I encourage anyone who may be in possession of an illegal firearm to make use of this opportunity and contribute to safer communities for all of us. Taken together, these developments demonstrate the continued work underway to strengthen our justice institutions, enhance cooperation with our partners, and improve public safety for the people of St. Martin. I thank you, and I am now available for any questions.
If you've just joined us, you are watching. Once again, thank you, Minister Tacklin, for your opening remarks. If you have just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, March 11, 2026. Thank you for joining us. We now move on to the question and answer session, and the floor is open. And Emma Lee of Anaisha Radio, you have the floor.
Good morning, Minister. My question is about the vehicle tax. There was an article today in the Herald about 63% of the motorists still haven't purchased their vehicle tax. And indeed, when I start looking on the road, I was trying to figure out what color the new stickers are and where people are putting them. You see tax stickers from 2 years ago still on vehicles. What's your plan for enforcement? And I assume in those controls, hopefully they will touch missing license plates, outdated insurance, tinted windows, things like that.
Correct. That is the intention, that all of this is enforced. And, you know, sometimes I notice too, sometimes no stickers, but it does, you know, individuals have them in the glove box. Of course, the law says you're supposed to stick it into your windshield. But we will be, you know, ramping up our enforcement measures and trying to bring more compliance across the board. And I know as well that I believe the Minister of Finance may have also announced it during a press briefing previously as well, is looking into bringing back the number plates, just because they're much easier to enforce rather than a sticker in the corner of a windshield. But I believe that that was a plan for 2027, not initially, of course, now for 2026.
So will you be doing heightened road controls now that to
Yes.
enforce these
Yes.
need for stickers? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Minister Tacklin. Thank you, Emil. I would now like to invite Jacqueline Hoffman of the Daily Herald. You have the floor.
Thank you. A break-in has just been reported at the receiver's office and the post office. Does this mean that the number plate money has been stolen?
Yeah. Obviously, I'm here and not across the street doing detective work. But I believe that from the information that I gathered too, that the Minister of Finance also communicated, I believe, to the media houses that for right now, there would be no services being offered from that building. And I believe that right now an investigation is taking place into what was stolen, if anything was stolen. So I don't know more than that at present.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Jacqueline. We now move on to the second round. Emil, you have the floor.
So I was having an interesting conversation with the law enforcement officer. And in that conversation came out that police officers don't have access to non-lethal means, such as like a taser, mace, and they said that it's not actually in the law to allow for those types of tools or equipment to be used. Can you comment on that? And doesn't that make sense to have those options available to our police officers?
To be fair, I'm not sure what the law here allows, but indeed, that I'm aware of, we don't have, you know, anyone that has mace. I think that there was a while where some of our forces did have mace, but then there was an issue with you also need another agent to counteract the effects of the mace, and then we didn't have those. And so it was, you know, all those technical issues that sound easy, and then once you get into government where we buy one thing and not the other, then you get those type of issues that are unintended as well. But I'll follow up on that to see what our law allows and how that's used. I remember at least, mace and tasers, maybe not, but of course we always see the officers with like the butu, as we call it here locally, which is also a form of non-lethal force as well. But I'll look into what needs to change, if it's possible, if it's not, and why those choices were made.
So, and the comment also was the batons, those extendable batons, they're not allowed to use those. They have to use the long ones, which are sort of bulky and not convenient. So again, if we could look at ensuring that they have good resources available.
Sure thing.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Emil. Jacqueline, you have the floor.
Thank you. Minister, how likely is it that suspects, for instance, robbery suspects, take a ferry and go to St. Bart's or other nearby islands? And is that something that has been talked about with the prefect about tracing suspects?
So a suspect here that flees and goes to another jurisdiction? We have very good cooperation with all our regional partners when it comes to intelligence sharing. We work very actively and exchange information and intelligence with the French, with St. Kitts, with Anguilla. So all of that functions very well. And I know that you can try to go to Anguilla, you can try to go to St. Bart's or anywhere else. We're going to find you eventually. So again, those cooperations are key, and very much, as we move more towards a police force that operates based on intelligence and is intelligence driven, those cooperations become even more important. And I think maybe you would have recalled last year we also signed a letter of intent with CARICOM Impacts between all the Dutch Caribbean police forces. So even on the CARICOM level, even though we're not a member of CARICOM, we're also exchanging information with our CARICOM partners.
You have previously stated that the French doesn't extradite suspects. So what happens when somebody commits a crime here on the Dutch side, then takes the ferry in Philipsburg or in Marigot to go to St. Bart? St. Bart doesn't have a prison. So do they extradite people that end up in
So an important
Gustavia?
clarification, the French do extradite, they don't extradite French nationals. So they won't extradite the person back to us, but it means that that person then would be prosecuted in France for whatever the crime was that was committed in our jurisdiction. So it's not that that person is able to evade any type of prosecution. That prosecution then takes place there. They just will not extradite French nationals to a foreign jurisdiction. That's constitutionally in their constitution embedded in France. So in this case, again, I can even recall, I think we just got somebody from St. Kitts that we had been looking for quite a while. So again, these exchanges happen constantly. It's not something that obviously we're publicizing every day that it happens, but extraditions do take place. We do find individuals, we get them back, and these things happen, I won't say on a daily basis, but definitely on a regular basis.
Thank you, Minister. We now move on to the third round. Emil, you have the floor.
A friend of mine was involved in a vehicle traffic accident caused by another person, and then that person subsequently took off and didn't wait for police. I'm hearing about more and more incidents of hit-and-run accidents. I know of one personally, and again, the police department didn't take it very seriously. As far as I know, they didn't follow up on the case, but it's a pretty serious offense. It's actually a criminal offense, as I understood. Is that something that you can perhaps instruct the police department to take more seriously?
The perfect answer for me to give publicly as well, but we take all things seriously, I think. And I think, over time, of course, we've had a police force that has a certain amount of FTEs that were the amount of FTEs that we conceptualized 15 years ago, while our population has changed and grown dramatically since that time, along with the amount of services, So we have a full service operation while we don't have a full service staff to match that. And unfortunately, a lot of times that means that incidents such as these don't get the attention, or they're not treated, in that sense, it appears to the outsider, it's not treated with the seriousness that it deserves. But I assure you, we obviously take all of these things seriously. A lot of times it's a matter of manpower, and every time having to choose, between kind of the worst of the two evils. And many times it's, the armed robbery versus this, or so again, I'm not saying this to make any excuses, and these are areas where, we will continue to fight for growth within our police force, because again, we had a growth plan. That growth plan, we haven't been able to grow in the way that we've wanted to, not only because of budgetary constraints, but also because of the reality of how difficult it is to actually select, to train, to grow your force up to a certain amount. So, yes, we take these seriously. We'd like to do, follow up on more of these cases, and, I'll definitely take this feedback along in my discussions with the police force. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. Jacqueline, you have the floor.
Immigration has been in the news lately. There are hundreds of people on the island that are subject to forced labor, in the sense that they came to the island, for instance, from the from China or from Venezuela, using illegal banks, money lenders that pay their tickets, really expensive or unaffordable for many people to come here, and then in return have to work 7 days a week for the next 5 years to pay back that loan. When you, in the meantime, arrest somebody as illegal and deport them, do you take in consideration that their lives may be in danger if they don't pay back those people, or their family lives will be in danger?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's human trafficking, and so that's what you just described. We have a unit here for mensenhandel, mensensmokkel. So if a person, we also have something called we have the NRC, which is the National Reporting Committee. It's actually at the immigration office. We've been looking to have that placed somewhere else, but where victims of human trafficking, human smuggling can come and actually alert authorities to their situation. And again, that can also be done at the police. So I urge anyone in a situation like this to know that you don't have to remain in a situation like that. Of course, when we have indications that there is a situation where there is human trafficking, human smuggling, we are not allowed to deport that person, because obviously then a victim, you would be then subjecting to deportation measures, which is not something that is allowable in that sense. So if we have indications, further research is done and conducted. But of course, if you're not sharing that information with authorities, if we don't notice from the interview, anybody that's picked up, an interview is conducted, questions are asked, standard questions are asked. If there are red flags, then that case is passed on to a different unit to be able to further investigate whether or not this is actually a matter of human trafficking, human smuggling. The prosecutor is called in. So that's a very serious offense, and in terms of, routine immigration controls, if there are no signs, no indications, then we can't be faulted as a government either for enforcing our local legislation.
But this would apply to the majority of Venezuelans on the island, because you have deported people from Venezuela back to Venezuela who then return to St. Martin just because they still have an outstanding loan. And they know that their family, that the illegal bankers know to find their family in Venezuela and know to find the people here.
Yeah.
So they get death threats if they don't pay back the money.
Again, human trafficking, human smuggling, it's a crime. So I don't know. I think the ministry is. So again, if an individual is in a situation like that, then I urge them to go to the prosecutor, to go to the police, and that matter will be investigated to look into its legitimacy. Sure.
Would you then allow people that are in that situation to stay on the island?
That would depend again on the specifics of that case. I'm not going to say publicly, if you come and say that you're being trafficked or smuggled, I will allow you to stay on St. Martin, because then everybody is going to say they were trafficked or smuggled. Again, this is a very serious crime, and it would have to be investigated. And of course, pending that investigation, we would need to look at what measures can be taken, yes or no. So it's not just, okay, I scream something and then I'm allowed to stay on the island. So that would be, again, that person would have to report to the authorities and the proper investigation would have to take place.
Thank you, Minister. As we do have more questions, I will allow one more round and then we will close off. Emil, you have the floor.
Thank you. First, just a clarification. You've come with an innovative solution for staffing up at the prison. Could you not do a similar solution for the police department that complained that they're not filling their FTEs?
I know in the past, there was, I think, a period of time in which we were receiving, we had quite a few people that had come and were working for the force from Suriname. We would need to look into that to see, how we can further give shape to that. I know it was something that was done in the past, maybe not to the extent that we have done so now. And of course, the support that we have is temporary from Suriname. Those individuals will go back, and that's also part of our agreement with Suriname, is that we won't retain their staff, because that's also been something that was an important part of that negotiation as well. So, I mean, yeah, there are options to look into that to see what those are. And I know that there's, in the past there have been discussions and cooperation between the forces.
Great. My last question, we had spoken probably towards the beginning of your term as a minister about the fact that the fines that the police are actually allowed to issue, the legislation's very old and the fines are very small. you have a complicated collection process because it needs to go through the prosecutor's office, and you were going to look at revising that in the same way that Curacao had done, increase the fees, put a special unit together. Is that something you've made any progress on?
So far, no. It is something that we're working on. We're currently engaged in bringing in external supports to be able to work at least on all fees and justice. So that would be an amendment of what we know as the Legesverordening, which applies to the entire government. But we want to, of course, specifically look in at the Ministry of Justice. The fees that we charge no longer actually cover the cost of providing that service. So we're looking at amending that. And as part of this, I think a next step might be looking into that. The issue right now is capacity, that we just don't have any capacity internally within the ministry to be able to do this. And we've also been we've requested that technical assistance from the TWO. However, whether or not we can get that assistance is contingent on an extension of the TWO, because as you know, it's right now, come April 2027, that should be the end of the TWO. There are discussions now about extending the lifespan of that. So that technical assistance is also tied into that kind of lifespan discussion that we have, which hopefully within the next 2 months we should have clarity, and then hopefully then we would be able to draw on some external expertise to assist us with that, because simply within the ministry we don't have the capacity.
Thank you, Minister. Jacqueline, you have the final question.
Thank you. Minister, I know you'd rather not say where the female prisoners from Point Blanche are held, but through the court we learned that Mrs. Joy Walker, convicted child rapist, is held in Holland. Why is, you will not talk about individual cases, but my question is, the cost of the detention in Holland is way more expensive than here. When it's like 400 guilders here, it might be 400 euros there per day. So that amounts to a certain 10,000 per month per detainee. Why would you send somebody who is not a murderer or a serial murderer that goes to Vught? Why would you send somebody who is not that dangerous to Holland with the Sint Maarten taxpayer having to pay for her for the next 3 years?
Yeah, so she's not in Holland. So that's incorrect. And currently, actually, at present, we are not. So as part of the arrangement, last year, I requested assistance from the Netherlands in order to help us with a couple of different things. Detention capacity, looking into bringing in external support into the prison, because we saw it as an immediate need to stabilize operations in order to ensure the right conditions for construction. We can't have an event happen such as last year, so it's really, really important to us that it's safe within that facility. And we were going through all the steps of, okay, how are we going to pay for it? Because we already have very limited budgetary room to do what we have to do. So in those negotiations and in those discussions with the Netherlands, one of the things I requested was, they were unwilling to pay for staff and things like this, but in the end, the kind of the quid pro quo in that sense was, can I not pay the invoices that are currently being sent for the people that we have housed in the Netherlands? That is where I was told, sure, no problem, we will not charge you. So as of January, we have not been paying for anybody that is currently housed in the Netherlands. And actually under the arrangements, we were paying for some people, not for other people. The way that we also use, there are different ways in which we can transfer prisoners within the kingdom. We have the ORD, which is actually the onderlinge regeling detentiecapaciteit. And then for medical reasons, for security reasons, or detention capacity reasons, the public prosecutor can request within the kingdom for inmates to be transferred over. So in the case of these ladies that were moved out of Point Blanche, in that sense, that is a request that goes through the public prosecutor, not the minister. And on the basis of those agreements as well, we are also now not paying for inmates housed in Aruba, Curaçao, Bonaire on the basis of this regeling, but then of course it's also tied in time. We can make use of the space for a year, for something like that. So we have a lot of those arrangements within the kingdom. So yes, those are, and so we're not right now, and this would also be if it were true, not an inmate that we would have sent, because typically people that are sent to Holland are the long sentences, because it's also inefficient for us to have to transport and then transport back if you're serving a shorter sentence. We also look at security risks and all of these different factors. So it's not just, we roll a dice and you pull a name out of a hat. These are considerations made looking at the types of offenses. So I hope that answers the question. Yes? Yeah.
Minister, sorry, just one
No.
comment, a request. Someone asked that the ministry clarify who the community police representatives are in the different neighborhoods,
okay.
because I guess some have moved on, some
Yeah.
have, and changed. So it'd be nice if you could perhaps publish a list
sure.
of those representatives per neighborhood.
Will do. Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll do that right away. That one's easy. Are there? I can take more questions,
Yes.
but I'll look at DCOM.
Jacqueline, do you have any further questions for the minister?
Okay.
No? Okay, so any further questions can be sent to the minister's cabinet in writing. This does bring us to the end of the question and answer session. Honorable Minister of Justice, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, March 11, 2026. For broadcast, tune into stmartingov.org, St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, Tel TV Plus Channel 15, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, and YouTube channel, Government of St. Martin. For video on demand, log on to the Government of St. Martin's YouTube channel. On behalf of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Rolika Roach and wishing you a pleasant day further.